of the things that I love doing is weird. I'm like Danny Tanner's. I love to clean. And some people are like, immediately when I tell them I like things clean, I like clean surfaces, people are like, well, don't come to my house. It's like, well, that's me. Like, I don't care what you do in your house. In my house, Isaac got one of these Melissa and Doug cleaning sets. Like, so he's carrying on after his dad, making a very proud father. Yeah, indoctrination. It's in our blood. But during that time, I'm like listening to podcasts, because my goal, I don't know what hit me, but I'm like, for once in our kid life, I'm going to have all their laundry like washed and folded. So I had the podcast going, and I was just in my zone. And plus, I knew how happy it would make my wife when she came, and so I wanted to make her happy too, to come home to folded laundry. But I was listening to a podcast interview with Conan O'Brien was doing with former First Lady Michelle Obama, and she said in this new book that she wrote that in 2018 she started to feel worthless, like she was not worth anything. And you think, wow, this person is such a heroic figure for so many of us, and to think, how does this person feel worthless? And she started talking about how we practice these voices of worth in our lives, that, we practice these voices of why we are not worth anything, why our lives don't carry any value. And a lot of times we say, well, it's just for a certain sect of people that feel worthless. But the reality is, people of this idea of not feeling worth something is transcends age. It transcends how much money you make. It transcends where you live. That we all, at points and moments of our life, feel like we're not worthy. And it's probably something in our society that kind of just constantly and consistently calls us to prove ourselves. And so today is Baptism of the Lord Sunday. It is a day that we retell the story of Jesus' own baptism. And we hear the words of affirmation that he received in his baptism, that this is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. And then the call for us is how we might remember our own baptism and how it might continue to influence our lives. I recognize, and maybe you didn't, we're a United Methodist New Faith community, and if you're just learning that for the first time, if you're like, I'm going to a non-denominational church, we're not a non-denominational church, but if that makes you feel better, we are. But I also recognize probably majority of us in this room come from a variety of paths, of Catholic, Presbyterian, Baptist, non-denominational, Jewish. Wow, you're far out. No, just kidding. We come to a variety of places of how we've come to understand what this thing called baptism is, where we carry a variety of ideas behind baptism, or we're still forming how this act of baptism and identity shapes our life. Baptism has been a historical practice in the church that has evolved throughout time. If you want to think about ways that you join a church, and how just sometimes going to a new church, a new space, new people can be like overwhelming. Well, historically, baptism, if you wanted to join the church, like you stripped down, like you gave, it was a vulnerable moment. Like you were going from, you're changing, transforming your life, and like you literally, yeah. So if people want to have an argument about sprinkling and dunking, at least we don't do that. But it's evolved throughout time of how we have done baptism. In some traditions we come from, people are immersed. Others are poured and sprinkled. In this tradition, we do. We obviously we baptize people in this place. But also, if you're like, hey, I've never been baptized before, I want to be baptized in the river, we'll go to the river and baptize. It's not really the mode of how the water is. It is not a good idea to tell the pastor prior to, like, I don't agree with sprinkling, because then I just make sure you get doused. I will make sure that I can seal my hands with a lot of water. So we come from a variety of paths, and so I recognize every time we come to this day, baptism for a lot of us is complicated. It can even be triggering. I've had people tell me from their backgrounds that every time they did something bad, their parents would take them to church and they would get dunked in the water again or go to the lake, and so I think it's important to name baptism is complicated, and that we bring our own narrative to the table. But I want to spend our time in thinking about maybe some of the ways that we can unite around this ritual, and kind of embrace these affirmative words that Jesus receives as our own. For us as a community, we want the sacraments of baptism and Holy Communion to be a present reality among us. Usually the baptismal font sits there as you walk in to this space, and then you walk right past it as you leave. I love this picture of kids eating bread around the baptismal font, and I think Flannery was kind of just playing with the water. In a lot of church traditions, I've maybe would have said, don't do that, don't touch that, don't touch the bowl. It would be my honor. I don't want kids to do this, but if they broke the bowl because they were playing with it, that would be a great thing. Because they were taught that close proximity to the sacraments is actually, I don't want them to break the bowl. But I love this picture. And then I kind of stood there and we kind of just talked about what these waters mean, and just simplistically, these waters remind us of how much of worth we are as people and how much God loves us. And so as we walk into this space, it's purposefully in our way to remind us that as we walk into this space, maybe we're walking in with voices of we just feel worthless. It's a reminder that you have entered into a safe space to where every person is dignified and is of great worth, and we want the space to be meaningful. But then as we leave this place, the waters are a reminder that we are surrounded by people in our lives who feel worthless, and we are called to hopefully speak worth into their lives. And so as we come to this day, my hope is that we might capture just a little bit more of what our baptism might mean, that we are greatly loved, that we are unique, and of great worth. Because we can find ourselves so often disavowing these very voices in our lives. Specifically today, I want to talk about the word comparison when it comes to our uniqueness and worth. Brene Brown and I talk about Brene Brown. I could just preach sermon every week. She's like my sermon. All right, we're going to talk about that word. I'll just go to Brene Brown. I go to the Bible too, but she's just a great resource because she's done a lot of research around human emotion. And I really, a few months ago, reading about what she has written about comparison, I thought is such a good word to talk about when we talk about uniqueness, when we talk about self-worth, when we talk about feeling loved. And so a lot of what I'm sharing today is what she has written. Comparison is not an emotion we feel. It's not like feeling anger. It's not like feeling sad. For most of us, comparison is just part of being human. we're always contrasting our lives against somebody, the backdrop of somebody else's. It's something we do consciously, but it's also something we do unconsciously. You might even be in this room, and I'm this way too. We talk a good act, a good show. I don't compare myself to others. I don't do that. And we have this voice in our head that we want to say that to one another, that oh, I don't do that, or I'm not that bad at that. And but the thing is, if you are a living, breathing human being, you compare yourself to others. You might be able to control, like, if you're angry or you're sad, but comparison is just kind of this thing that exists in our human DNA. Even upstairs, Piper is sharing with the kids about comparison, because this is not something isolated between adults and children. Like, it's something that kids are learning and doing as well. Maybe they come back from vacation and like, what did you get for Christmas? Well, I didn't get that. Why didn't I get that? And they're doing this comparison. So Brene Brown says comparison is comparing ourselves to others, is about conforming. It's fitting in. Like, I'm contrasting, how I fit into whatever the thing might be. And then it's competing. I'm better than. So we think about in our jobs, perhaps. We're always constantly comparing ourselves to maybe somebody that gets a promotion, and we're like, why didn't I get that promotion? Or we get the promotion, and we feel better than. And so conforming, fitting in, what do I need to do to fit in? And then competing against. And she gives, I think you can go to the next slide. I'm really heavy on slides today. This is not the norm. But I'm really excited about this. Comparing ourselves to others paralyzes our aspirations because we compare ourselves to a coworker, to a friend, to a parent. We might see someone else's success and wonder, why isn't that me? Is something wrong? We begin to ask this, like, is something wrong with me? Is there something, why can't I do what they're doing? And it can lead to bitterness and to resentment. And we begin to, she calls comparison a creativity killer. The meaning that we're so like focused on like fitting in and conforming and competing that we lose sight of our aspirations. So when we're comparing ourselves to others, we lose sight of like, I'm worth something. We lose sight of I'm unique. We lose sight of our passions, our giftings, our personality, our own needs. It challenges our self-concept of, I just must not be who God created me to be because people that are next to me are doing better. Something must be wrong with me and our well-being. Have you ever, like, maybe you've entered into the new year and you're like, I'm going to walk a mile a day. Maybe you don't walk at all, and you're like, I'm going to walk a mile a day. And that's like a really great goal. And then you see a coworker and you're like, hey, I'm going to walk a mile a day. And they're like, yeah, I'm going to run 4 marathons this year. And you're just like, I'm just going to eat ice cream, actually. You're just like, and so it affects your well-being and how you take care of yourself, because it's like, this is what I need to do that's good for me. And when we keep comparing ourselves to others, we lose sight of like what is good for me and what I do. Oscar Wilde says this: "Be yourself. Everyone else is already taken." I feel like this is emblematic of what our baptismal waters call us to and remind us of in a world where we oftentimes compare ourselves to others. And we try to fit into what others think and who we ought to be. And just realizing the gift of you, the world that you bring to the world. To embrace who God created us to be. Not the idea and person that others want us to be. But today is a day that we are reminded that we are each created in the image of God and are of great worth. I think this is a lifelong work. You would hope that we would capture it, but in the world for which we live, that calls us to prove ourselves worthy of love, and our own humanity and DNA that compares ourselves constantly to other people, we have to do the work of reminding ourselves often that I am of great worth, that I am unique, that I am created in the image of God. I started thinking about concrete steps that I think we can take, because the reality of it is that there's nothing you can really do to turn off comparing yourself to others. There's no secret to that. But I think there's something important in naming that comparison of others. That's a very vulnerable thing to name. I'm comparing myself to others. I'm comparing myself to other people. But I think naming that awareness to ourselves and to others is really important and valuable. I'm not going to lie, I sometimes venture on YouTube to look at other churches, and I go, wow, look at this person. This person is so successful, and then there's me. That guy has hair. I don't have hair. But I think awareness can be really powerful when we begin to name, that's something we do, I do. And then oftentimes, have you ever gone and looked at somebody's life on Facebook and you're like, oh, they're on a cruise right now. Look at me. I got to go to work tomorrow. And I think also, number 2 is learning to appreciate the differences of others. I think this is really hard. The differences of others rather than trying to conform or compete to where people are in their life. Just being grateful and appreciating someone's difference. We might see someone's success and just vocalizing it and trying, I'm a very cynical person, but just trying it is really good for them, that they're in this place in their life, that they could be in that place. And I think somewhere in there when we begin to say, okay, I'm starting to compare myself, if I can just change that and to say, I'm grateful for that person and their success and what they've accomplished. And then last, which is probably needs the entirety of a sermon, is how we place ourselves in places where we will compare ourselves to others. And I've already shared one, going to YouTube and to Googling other churches, not for getting information, but to find myself in these 2 ways, to conform or to compete. And it's a personal battle. And I think I have some thoughts about social media. If Bradley was here, and he's not, I think different people can be at different places with social media. But I think personally for me, social media is mostly bad. I don't see a lot of good for me. Do y'all get that? I said that for me. What is it for you is for you to define. Because social media can really expose this whole comparison thing. Because we don't post the pictures and videos of the arguments and the fights and the real life, that nothing's always as clean and clear. But when we look at someone's social media, we go, wow, they really got their stuff together. And so maybe a good concrete action is to lessen our time and how we view one another's life on social media. And to really be a little bit old-fashioned and to be somewhat ignorant and naive about what is happening in each other's life. Wouldn't it be great to just show up to this place and learn authentically what's happening in one another's life, rather than finding out on social media? Again, that's not a Jesus thing. That is how do we hear that voice of love in our lives? And I'm more intensive in that area, and I think some of our personalities really can handle social media really well. I don't carry one of those personalities. And so thinking about how we draw those comparisons in social media world. I want to take a few moments to ask, how might this word of comparison, self-worth, baptism, kind of rest with you? Where do you feel like this might be drawing some conversation in your head or reflection?
Is it a rhetorical question?
No, it's a question for y'all. Thank you for clarifying.
Well, I know I'm terrible about that. And I'll take it one step.
And can you say your name too?
Elaine Berry.
Thank you. Please state your name.
I'll take it one step further. Sometimes I'm downright envious, and it's a fault. It's a fault. But one of the things that you said that got me thinking, and it's something I've thought about a good amount, is about comparison of churches, because I remember going to a local church where they basically said that they were better than the church right down the street, and that those people would not sit at the right hand of Jesus. And I was like, whoa, that was a huge turnoff for me. But I need to say I didn't go back to that church. People keep coming back to this church. There's something at this church that we can't find or have not found at a bigger church or a church that has a big building or whatever. And I think that's like in our own lives sometimes, recently there was somebody that we know that I thought had a very happy marriage, and I was envious of what they had, material. And then I found out they got getting a divorce, and I was absolutely shocked. And I think it goes back to what you were saying, that, we don't always know the inner part of what's going on, but, it's something that we all do, we all compare, but we're oftentimes just seeing that surface level when we're comparing relationships or friends or, whatever. With the church, this is the church that I find provides the most of what I need, and I'm just speaking for myself, but comparison-wise, yeah, they're bigger churches, they're wealthier churches, but as we were saying this morning, this is the church where I feel that I'm accepted and that I have something to give, and I'm receiving a lot from everybody.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I am Elaine Berry.
Jason, you said something that I'm sorry, I'm Dawn.
Yeah. I'm trying to be more mindful that we might not know each other. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Dawn.
Yeah.
I'm a recovering Methodist. So I had actually heard that podcast as well about Michelle Obama, and I'd read the book, and it's interesting because on the exterior, who wouldn't have more self-worth than Michelle Obama, right? But it reminded me of several years ago when Mother Teresa was going through the canonization process. They, published her letters, and I go back to that over and over again about her feelings of self-worth, and she had none. And those were in her own words. She said she felt abandoned. I'm paraphrasing, but she said she felt abandoned by God. She did not feel important. She didn't feel that her work was important. She did not feel that connection. And I'm thinking, who in modern times can any of us think of in our lifetime who has more worth than Mother Teresa? You know? And so I think that what that reminds us of is there is no external reward that will develop self-worth. Nothing. It's not power, it's not rewards, it's not good deeds. That you have to find that internally. And in order to do that, you have to accept that you're not what the world values.
It's okay, Papa.
And I think that that is a hard thing to come to terms with, that you'll live your whole life and that the only one who can define your worth is God. And the only way you can accept that worth is by accepting that God has created you perfectly. And it may not be the way you wanted him to create you. Right. You may have wanted him to create you to do amazing things and to leave, cure cancer. And maybe that wasn't his design all along, And that's where I think that's where self-worth comes from, is accepting the limitations of, you have to surrender to God's will, not external. Yeah. I didn't say that very well. But
it reminds me of the starfish, analogy or whatever, that when you go one up and threw it back, it made a difference to that one. I don't know, their teachers here, that's what gets you through the day. When you're having not so great day, is that one starfish might be that you put back in the ocean, and it mattered to them. And I think that's something that we can all, there's no comparison there. It's just you do the right thing for somebody else.
I got like 2 minutes. Anybody got something that they're like chomping at the bit? Yeah.
Hi, this is my first time here.
And welcome.
My name is Kathy Rose. I struggle every day with feeling my self-worth. Until 8 years ago, I was an electrical engineer, and I designed parts for NASA. And I always felt like that's where I had my worth. I did important things. I was a mom, but I only had 2 children at the time, and I worked a lot. That is always where I found myself. And then I had premature twins that were born, and I had to quit working. They had some serious health issues, and I have a severely disabled son. So now I stay at home, and I homeschool him. And some days I, change 4 cookie pull-ups, and I clean boogers off of my refrigerator, and I think to myself, I used to design stuff for NASA. And it's hard, but then I always try to think about, I also have terminal cancer, so I think about this, all the last 8 years when I have been at home with my children, that was a plan that was put in place that I didn't even know, because I needed that time at home.
Thank you.
It's
Kat?
worth it.
Yeah. And Kathy, that's your name? Kathy? It's nice to meet you, and we're glad that you are here.
Comparison is the thief of joy. Comparison is the thief of joy. My mantra.
Yeah.
Jen
Yeah.
Shepherd.
Yeah.
Those are words that go up on the refrigerator.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. I feel like that's like sermon plus. Y'all just preach the rest of the sermon that was not there, that needed to be there. And so y'all are preachers, and thank you. So in a few moments, we will take communion, and then I'll do the sign of a cross on your forehead to remember your baptism. And even I don't know everybody's baptismal history, but if you're like, was I baptized? I don't know. You are still of great worth, and it is just a symbol. And so let me do the honor of putting that symbol on you. And if you want to be baptized or you want your child to be baptized, we would love to do that as well. And so you can talk to, not today, but we can definitely talk about that, have that conversation. And then we'll receive communion. So I just want to emphasize everybody is welcome at this table. If somebody will go upstairs and to gather the kids, and I will invite us in to our communion liturgy. I invite you to recite these words before us. This is not my table. This is not our church's table. This is not our denomination's table or an American table or a table reserved for the wealthy or well-connected. This table is reserved for sinners, for the poor, for those who are cast out, for those who hunger and thirst. This table belongs to Jesus Christ.